Foundation and the Department of World Languages here at QSU. Our speaker tonight is Morgan Pope, who's sitting right here. He's a long-time member of the Scandinavian Foundation, and he has also served several years on the board, and he's an enthusiastic supporter of our organization. Morgan has had a long and distinguished career, and here it is. I'm going to read it all up because it's complicated. Morgan worked for Textronics 28 years, starting as a research scientist and ending managing research and development. After leaving Textronics, he started a consulting company which worked with the Oregon Economic Development Department, the Port and Development Commission, and various companies on workforce and other economic development issues. That will be a quiz afterwards. He has also worked part-time at PSU beginning in January 1990 as coordinator for university and industry relations, and spent 14 months as interim vice president of university relations, and ended his time here in 2004 as associate dean for outreach in the Massey College of Engineering and Computer Science. Am I glad I wrote this down? I would never be able to remember all this. So, and Morgan's wife, who's sitting right here, Connie, is half Swedish, and Morgan has his whole married life trying to find out if he was also of Scandinavian descent. And he has done some genealogy research, but then he went into DNA, and bingo, there it was. He discovered he was 37% Scandinavian. And now he's a member of the Nordic race. And tonight he's going to tell us how it's going to be done. You can find your, for now where you came from, the DNA. He's not going to go all the way back to the apes. I hope not. Will you?
I am.
Okay. Oh my God. Okay. So let's go for more.
Thanks, Elsa. My mother, and thank you for that. She wrote that some time ago, and I just keep it in my pocket. Well, you see, we were talking about having programs on Friday night. I haven't been on that committee. Thank you very much, Marilyn. And we got to talking about using DNA, and I said, well, I know genetic biologists, but I've tried to use it, and I have some funny stories. So we were going to have, I was going to be sort of the meeting beginning, and then there was going to be some flim-flam with big words, right? Well, we couldn't find those people to match up in time, so I'm here and I get to use the whole time. Let me see. Now, I want to talk about my adventures, aliens adventures, in trying to use DNA to find out about my ancestry. I am not a DNA savvy scientist. Physicists yet do not these things. I've done a lot of genealogy work for myself and for Connie on the internet with Ancestry.com and all those other .coms, and found out some interesting things. But there are a couple of problems that bother me, and I want to talk a little bit about that tonight and how they led me into this primrose path. One thing about finding things on the internet, I hope you've all learned, you can't believe everything you read. And there are a lot of people way more optimistic about things than I am, and some worse. So I spent a lot of time there and ran things back, and I had luck. I had success. I really did. And one of those successes is up here. Osa said Connie is half-Swede, and I envy her. She can go back to Sweden, see her cousins. They're wonderful people. I love going over there. I'd be gone now if she let me go. It's very nice. And I had not been able, at that time, had not been able to chase any of my relatives back further than about 1785 in Kentucky, which is not quite the same. So I said, well, there's got to be something better than this, and I know a little science. I will start looking at DNA, which I did. Actually did together. The first thing was National Geographic came up with a program called the National Geographic Project with IBM and I think it was the Waite Family Trust, looking into very deep DNA work back to Africa. And scientists is always intrigued about data. So we had our DNA tested, and it was quite interesting, and it was very deep, and it went back, Connie's case, 150,000 years ago, and mine 60,000 years ago, and I'll show you some of that at the end. But it didn't tell me a whole lot about my problem. So there was a rumor in my family that one of my grandmothers was Swedish. She had the most unlikely Swedish name you ever heard of, Jemima Vardaman. Caused Connie to doubt that quite a bit. However, I persisted on the internet, and guess what? I found that my 9th great-grandfather on my 4th great-grandmother's side came to this country in 1654 to the Swedish colony. He was on the last ship that came over, the Horn, which came in 1654. And he didn't live very long, but he brought a whole passel of kids with him. They came over on a ship that was doubled up because the ship had disintegrated, and they had a lot of people, and so they crammed them all on one ship. 120 people died on the way over. There's a lot of data about these people in the Swedish colony group, colonial society. And I brought this along to show Marion because Marion also has family that came here. Just to prove to her that this is my 9th great-grandfather, and this is 2 generations later, a house that's back there. So I have found things on the internet, okay, but I have a problem, and here's my problem.
The letter B.
Oh, the letter B, yes, thank you very much. Letter B. Here's my problem, it's sort of on the paternal side, here are my surnames, and on the maternal side, and as you look at those, you don't see a whole lot of Scandinavian. Maybe Patterson with Peterson, but I don't think so. More likely Irish, as you can see. English, Irish, maybe Germanic name, maybe French Huguenot, maybe Belgian, don't know. And interestingly, aside,
that's on both sides.
I put this, yeah, and Jeffrey's on both sides. I came from a small area in Missouri.
Wait a minute.
The gene pool is not too deep there.
Hey.
Lupertus, well, anyway, I don't know what to say about them except it's interesting. Lots of Irish sounding, Scottish sounding, English sounding names. And so I really am frustrated because I really want to find out more about the Pope family since that's my last name. And I am dead stuck in 1785, July 3rd. 1785, my grandfather William Pope and Jemima Vardaman were married in what's now Kentucky, was then, I think, probably Virginia. It's right on that cusp. And it's dead from then on, can't find anybody. Lots of popes in the area, none of them related to me. I paid a fair amount of money to a professional genealogist who found out exactly what we found out, nothing. So, I decided to turn to data. I'm a scientist by training, and what's better than data? So, I began this DNA thing about 2003, 4, something like that. We began with the Genographic Project because I didn't know any better and because I read National Geographic and it looked good. And so we both put in our DNA and back came this data, the deep data about where our relatives came from in Africa, or where they came from in Africa. And that didn't give me any information I needed real badly. But it's intriguing, and so last year I sent in another batch of DNA because they have more data. And I'll talk about that at the end. So here we are, here's my problem. I'm trying DNA, I really don't know what I'm doing and I'm getting interesting information. So we both put in information to Ancestry.com. There are about 4 DNA groups that I see constantly on the internet. 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, Ancestry.com, the Genographic Project, which is really not good for looking for your relatives, but it's interesting from a long-term project. So, you see my problem? Oh, I gave you a bigger problem. On the maternal side, I can go back to my 3rd great-grandfather, and then it's... So I really want to find out about these people, and I think now I've invested enough money and time at the computer that I may be ready to make a serious try at the Pope thing, and we'll talk about that a little toward the end. But I want to talk about DNA. I'm sure you're all quite familiar with what it is, but I wasn't so familiar, and I want to run through some things just so we all know what we're talking about. DNA, and it looks, see this thing moving up in here? That's a DNA molecule, part of a DNA molecule. It's like a ladder with rungs that's twisted, okay? And by the way, it's got a lot of parts and pieces. If you have your DNA run and then want to print it out on 8x10 paper, many pages, one of them single-spaced lines, forever and ever. It's very complicated because it contains all the instructions passed from one adult organism to another. It's an amazing thing, and well, sounds good, right? So where is it? Where do you find it? It's actually in the nucleus of the cell. It is not the whole thing. It's a part of the cell. So they have to pack it relatively tightly, and each DNA molecule that's packaged tightly is called a chromosome. We have 46 chromosomes in our DNA. Is that right? And 2 of them are sex chromosomes. They don't really count other than they figure out whether you're going to be a boy or a girl when you were born. But, so this is a word you'll run across a lot. And we can walk our way through this in a reasonable time. The complete DNA instruction book for a human has about 3 billion bases, about 20,000 genes on 23 pairs of chromosomes. It's staggering to think that now you can swab your cheek, or in one case, spit in a bottle, send it off, and they can look at all this data. Ain't science wonderful? It is. So it contains all the instructions needed to develop, survive, and reproduce. And it's just in the nucleus of another chemical compound. So, who discovered DNA? Actually, it was discovered quite a long while ago, in the late 1800s, by a German, of course, Friedrich Miescher. And he spent a lot of time studying it and didn't come up with what it was. And in 1953, Watson, Crick, and Wilkins determined that it wasn't where everybody had been looking. It was not a protein at all. It was ribonucleic acid, deoxyribonucleic acid, not a protein. Everybody, all the scientists in the past have been looking at proteins. Two interesting stories here. This is a woman's name, you notice. There's a little backstory about this. Wilson, Crick, and Wilkins got the Nobel Prize for discovering this. This woman, Rosalind Franklin, worked in the same lab, actually did the x-rays that delineated the structure of DNA. There are various stories about why she was not included. Most of them you women might understand. And I'm no expert in this. One of the stories is she was a woman and she worked for this guy, Maurice Wilkins. And when he'd been on a trip or something and she was working in his lab when he came back, and he just assumed she was a lab helper, although she had a PhD. And she actually got the x-ray pictures of the DNA. He saw them and shared them with Watson and Crick. And they jumped on it because they've been doing a lot of work and were waiting for something. When they saw it, they knew what they had and they published.
Yep.
And they put his name on it, but they did not put her name on the publication.
Right. My grandfather was good friends with her, right?
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an interesting story. There's another backstory that's Oregon related. Linus Pauling, along at the same time, one of the great scientists, chemists we've ever put out, was working on this project. He thought it was protein still, and he kept working on protein structures, trying to fit it into his head, which was considerably in terms of capacity and capability. But he kept working and thinking it was a protein, and it wasn't. There are some interesting rumors about him. One rumor is that he did think a lot of himself. I think that's fairly well known in the world. And he was so sure that he was working on what was the right thing to do, he often didn't bother to go to conferences where other people talked, because he was, okay? Horribly bright. So he wasn't paying much attention to what was in the literature, and when this X-ray image came out and was finally publicized, he was too late. I don't know if that story is true either, but I read it and I saw it on a program on OPB within a year. So that's DNA about as much as I'm going to talk to you about. And now I want to talk to you about the test that we've had done, and I'll talk about mine. The one that seems to be most popular now for people to take is called Autosomal Dna. It's Autosomal Dna is inherited both from the mother and the father, and so it goes back a ways, and you can really chase back if you have data. If you have data. The secret to DNA, I forgot the secret. I'll tell you the secret. Using DNA is a major data-intensive world, okay? And for it to work, a lot of people have got to have their DNA done. And I can show you an example. The very first one I'm going to show you is Autosomal DNA. That was done by Ancestry.com. And I'll talk about that right now, actually. This is from Ancestry.com. We had the Ancestry.com test done, and my results looked like this. I do one
Oh,
of
you're
the Scandinavian.
41, I got it wrong. Oh, no, I'm not 37.
That's even better.
That showed up in good time, huh?
I wanted to be a Scandinavian so badly. There I was, right? Oh my God! How do I justify this with that list of names you first saw out there?
Always follow your hunches.
And so what I did was I said, okay, I looked at the British Isles, I looked, and I said, okay, those Scandinavians, they were all over England, they were all over Scotland, they were all over Ireland, they went over to France, they were all around, and they probably sowed some seeds. So that would explain. Seemed a little high, for me, but that would explain what was going on. Well, okay, so British Isles I could agree with. The uncertain I always claimed was Neanderthal.
5%'s a little high for him.
It's a little high, but you'd be surprised. Southern Europe, the Italians. They were in England for 300-400 years.
Just the Romans, you know.
They built Hadrian's Wall. They probably also kind of wandered around a bit. So I told this story to quite a few people in this audience, I'm sure, when I found this out. They looked at me like I was a little crazy, but what's that? Then they began to get a lot of criticism about showing data that didn't seem right to the world. So they did another run on it, and I just found this about 2 months ago when I started thinking about this. They looked at their data again. Take a note.
Now we're done with the lives.
And they've got great.
That's true.
That's a good.
And
The thing
right-
to remember is these are only as good as their data samples that they get.
Absolutely.
That's, regardless of geneticist,
That's it.
I'm adopted, so I'm on the same search.
It has to be, there's gotta be a lot of data. If we could live long enough, we could find out a lot. I'm not gonna live that long, but I'm gonna keep working at it, okay?
Depends on what samples you match to, so if people didn't give samples. I'm unidentified Northern European, but I have relatives peppered all across Scandinavia, every single freaking country, all 5 of them. I come
So,
up as unidentified.
so look at this, we got, that's quite a change from the first one. Same data,
Yeah.
no change,
Wow.
same sample. Okay, so, but I'll tell you what, there is some Scandinavian, there's some Finland. This guy is a Finn-Swede.
Very typical for.
Jemima's 6th great grandfather was a Finn.
Here from all of them, it's gonna come up and confuse the system with what a geneticist told me, because I'm an all 5. I'm literally too much of a Scandi mutt, something to call myself, to come up as any one.
Yeah.
So I come up as nothing but
A
unidentified.
Scandi mutt.
A Scandi mutt.
Can I use that?
Oh, sure, all 5 countries.
Yeah.
So there's the data. Well, that wasn't very useful, frankly, to me. That's not gonna help me find my Pope or my Sullivan grandfather. So I went to Family Tree DNA, which has a large database, and I did a couple of shots at my Y DNA, which is the DNA that follows my father back, okay? doesn't mess around with the woman's side. Okay, so what happens there? Only males inherit the Y chromosome, so you can trace straight back in a straight line, unless something funny happens. Can really go back a long way. So you all remember about men and women and the sex chromosomes they have? Women have the X, two X's. Men have an X and a Y. So if another X comes along from the father, it's a girl. If a Y comes along from the father, it's a boy. So Y goes way back. As long as you have names to match with it, then you're okay. But if you don't have a name, you come up with something that's called a haplotype. And that haplotype is a long description of what you look like compared to a whole lot of other people, period. And I have that in here somewhere, but we're going to go marching on here for a little moment and look at my Y-DNA. Well, let's look at the mitochondrial DNA, which is the Y-DNA equivalent for women. So it goes back from you to your, if you're a woman, you to your mother and her mother and her mother, and it keeps going back to the Africa. And apparently, and I can't verify this, not being a geneticist, apparently the mitochondrial DNA is not quite as likely to mutate as the Y-DNA. So it could be a pretty straight shot back. And the Y-DNA does mutate, and I think you can see that later in some of the data I'm going to put up about myself and my mother, because I also had the autosomal test done also. So here we go, I think now. The first test I had done with family tree DNA, the haplogroup was called R1B1A2, and it's the most common haplogroup in European populations. They think it's expanded through Europe as humans recolonized after the last glacial period ended about 10 to 12,000 years ago. So we were early in Europe in some ways, out of the Middle East mainly. Since that time, the nomenclature has changed, of course. But it turns out that this R1, R1B, B2, whatever, was getting too long, so they decided to make it shorter, and it became RM269. It likely began in West Asia. If you know all these things, you know some of my genetic cousins traveled into Central Asia and on to Europe, and others moved south into the Levant region. The Levant, are you all old enough to know where the Levant region was?
No.
It's from Egypt to Anatolia, we call it
The Middle East.
Turkey, on the Arabian Peninsula, that's where the people there, Palestine, Israel now, Iraq, Iran, those people. So they went two ways. And then we come to the Genographic Project, which I want to talk about because it has pretty slides.
National Geographic?
That's the National Geographic. So we originated here, and depending on whether you're female or male, you originated there around 150 to 180,000 years ago. The male, obviously there was one there, but the one I apparently came from was up about here. when he came around about 60,000 years ago. But take a look. This is fascinating to look at because the Genographic Project now has pretty much convinced itself, and I'm pretty much convinced, they have gone around picking up DNA from all kinds of cultures, all kinds of tribes and so on, all over the world, and tested their DNA. So they have a database that's pretty large, 606,000 people. And spread out everywhere, not just people like me looking to see if I'm Swedish. And they've come up with a reasonably good story about how everybody got to where they got to from here. And so, according to the Genographic Project, in not coming into any of my world's ancestries, what do I look like? Which I think is interesting. So here we go. I'm 43% Northern European, 38% Mediterranean, 18% Southwest Asian. Isn't that interesting? Surprised me. And what this one matches most closely is the DNA of Germans. And they have things like these. You know, we're not all going to be alike, or otherwise they could probably come from Germany. They have data like this for all kinds of the cultures throughout the world, and you can look and compare yourself to what you look like. Fascinating. Now, one other part that I giggled about earlier. I'm 1.5% Neanderthal. My wife says they put the decimal place wrong. And she didn't mean 0.15.
We have to start somewhere.
The other part, did you read this down here?
What is it?
You know about Denisovans?
No.
They left Africa before Neanderthals. They're smaller stature people. They've been finding data about them in Russia and in northern Germany in the last few years. Lots of data. And they are probably well mixed into the Oriental DNA. Their stature, they're smaller. So they were at least two of the hominids that left Africa well before Homo sapiens. The guess on Neanderthals, I think, is about 400,000 to 500,000 years ago, somewhere along 2 to 4. Denisovans earlier. And they have just, in fact, within the months counting, maybe you saw it on the internet, found footprints along the beach in Suffolk, England, small footprints of hominids, which they are at the moment arguing about whether or not those are Denisovans. They were smaller, didn't have the brow ridge problem that us Neanderthals have. But, you know, they claim that the DNA we get from Neanderthals has to do with our skin and hair, and I'm certainly a good example of that. At least no hair. So, but here's the thing, and I love this, and subject to change.
Based on all the new research.
All the data coming in here is incredible, and the more people that have their DNA tested, the more data comes in. And it's just like it's like the world's worst statistical problem. The more data you get, the better the data you have.
Like getting a computer science degree, it's a whole year.
Yeah, it's or for 6 months. Right. So I'm going to do a couple more things here. This is interesting, I think, because they also draw a map from where they believe my mother came from and where my mother, long time ago mother, excuse me, started here, the usual place for the females, came up, went out to the Middle East, and then went over to Europe, in the same general area where most of us are from. My paternal branch, everybody see, my paternal branch started down in here somewhere, but notice it's more up in here in Africa. It's up higher. Went way over to Central Asia, up to Central Asia, down,
Through Siberia.
and then up here to the British Isles, and then down towards Spain. And I guess it makes a little sense.
Your subtype there, the RP310, is most common in Irish and Iberians, actually. They're finding out that Spanish Iberians are related
Related to the
This is
Irish.
in the old Irish
Yeah.
text, actually. They say that Iberians come up.
So that would fit with my O'Sullivan and O'Connor, and probably maybe a little bit of Scottish McDowell. I'm sorry, Lee Gould. So, yes,
Morgan, how come they never got you to America? I mean, you've been here.
well, they're not gonna ever get me to go into America.
It's 2 reasons.
We haven't enough data yet to get me to go to America,
Okay.
and they may never get me to America.
This is going back 20 to 60 years.
Yeah, this is going back a long, long
It's
time.
ancient.
Agent. So it's not gonna help me. That's one of the reasons I put it in. It's great data, it's a lot of fun, but it isn't gonna help me. I gotta go back to Y-DNA and find somebody with Pope as a last name and my Y-DNA. Now, what do you think the chances are for that? Not a lot, but I'm gonna try.
One day you get somebody else in your family that does the
It is
test.
getting better, that's correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of databases that you can upload your information onto, and they will actually identify who you're related to in that case.
Oh, I have time here, right? Okay, so I have to tell you the story about Ancestry.com. They have something like that. And every once in a while, they dump a load of people who might be my 3rd to 5th cousins, or 4th, or no, 5th, and then on and on. And honestly, God, I have found 4 cousins in the 3rd to 5th thing and never found anything beyond that. 2 of them I knew, one of them is my first cousin, and we're both on their data and stuff. He's never had his DNA done, so they're obviously looking at the, just the genealogy.
It's a combination.
Well, he hasn't had his DNA done, so I know.
Is this on 23andMe?
No, Ancestry.com.
Oh, Ancestry, you want to be the
And I found 2 others who were related not through the Popes, but through the Jeffreys, by the way, the ones that I have, one on each side, so there's a good possibility there. So I have found people with a Y-DNA, which Family Tree DNA does. I've not found any who match mine with the last name Pope, so it's a waste of my time, I think. You can correct me. But I need it, I think it has to be my name and my DNA.
Not unless there were other people involved.
Yeah, that's
I was
it.
gonna say, you can have people like me or adoptees that pop up out of the woodwork or the closet, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, so, before I take questions that I now have help with, I have to tell you where I eventually got to about 2 weeks ago in frustration. So, you know, vote for me when I get on.
I'll find out everything about you.
So, I'm open to trying to answer your questions. I've had an exciting time. I've spent a fair amount of money. And I really do think maybe that my DNA has got to be what I do in the development.
How much European history did you have to study to understand where some of these people came from? Because in tracing mine, I had to go back and study European history to understand why they did what they did at a particular time in history. And I'm just curious if you discovered the same thing.
Well, I had it easier because with all these British Isles kind of people in my background, there is a wonderful book called Albion Seed. And it is by David Hackett Fisher. And if you came from England or Ireland or Scotland, it's like a Bible. It breaks them into 4 groups of people in terms of their migration to the U.S. And it describes my McDowell ancestries to a T. It says in that book that they left, that, you know, they didn't get along too well with each other in Scotland. And then the British had a lot of problems with them, and in the case of my family, and as we know, Cromwell, they didn't get along with Cromwell very well, and then either they had to leave Scotland and jump over to Ireland to get away from Cromwell, which is the better part of the story, or they were sent over to be a part of the English plantations in Ireland, which most of us don't like so well, but so they did that, and through that information, I was able to actually trace my dual relatives. Pardon?
Get rid of it.
Oh, get rid of it. I'm done. Exercise to follow, I was able to again, by going on the internet, find a cousin whom I was close enough related to, I could trust his data, mostly, as much as you can trust his style. And I was able to find that they had ended up in Larne, Ireland, which is 13 miles from Scotland across the sea. And in 2007, 8, we went to Larne and knew that there was a cemetery there with McDougal's in the cemetery, in Relu Parish. And by pretty much dumb luck, other than being in the area, we went to a B&B, and they, being the friendly people that they are in general, said, "And what would you be doing here?" And we said, "Well, I'd be looking for McDowell's in Relu Parish." And he says, "We call it McDougal." And my wife's a McDougal. Maybe you're related. And we were. We used the same McDougal website to get our data. And my relatives left there 275 years ago. And the husband, who was not a McDougal, took us to the Relu Parish Cemetery, and we found McDougal headstone. So luck, oh well, luck, and a little, there are things other than DNA. Yes, sir.
How does this DNA research relate to the races we think of as black, white, brown, red, yellow?
Well, actually, it doesn't relate at all. I mean, we all came from the same place. We changed colors, we got bigger, we got shorter, we got whatever.
Yeah, good answer. We are all related if you go back.
We are all related if you go back far enough. The data says, I know there are people who don't believe that, but I believe it.
So if you find anybody, I mean, you're all novices here, if you suggest to somebody, how would they get started on this thing here? What would you suggest? How do you get started?
Well, who do you want to track? You want to track your father? If so, you have to have, you're in bad trouble.
Already.
You have to have, like for me, my dad passed away before I could do anything like that. I don't have any brothers, so I have to go to my nearest cousin or uncle
In the mail line.
and on the mail line to do the testing to
Yeah.
find out what my dad's
Yes,
stuff is.
exactly what you need to do. You need to find somebody in the direct line from your father back as a male. It can be his brother's son, but it has to be that. In your case, your mother's DNA is yours, and it goes in a straight line, but, you know, you run into problems because people get married and you start trying to match up.
Yeah, it's not how to track names, but you get a basic idea.
But you
where
can
your
get an idea where they may have come from.
big
You
mom
bet.
came from, doesn't
You bet.
But I'm less messed up than you are, because I probably am too, I think
You want to be careful what
Yeah,
you
you're
say.
right, right. There are no pure races,
there's
yeah.
I have learned that.
that.
I'm a muck, but,
We all are.
Yeah, all
There's
of it.
actually a disclaimer on 23andMe, and I laughed my behind off because I'm not searching for a birth father, but there's a disclaimer that you won't sue us if you don't like your results. In other words, if you find out that you have a half sister that your father never told you about, you can't blame us for that.
But you did all these on your own. Can you find somebody who'll do it for you? You pay somebody?
sure, absolutely.
Okay, hope you find them.
You can find them at Ancestry.com, you can find them at all their genome projects all over the
It's the
internet.
International
Okay.
Genealogy Society.
Yeah, right,
National Geographic
whatever it
Society.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can find them everywhere and they're happy to take your money.
They're reliable.
Yeah, give me your email and I'll send you
Mostly.
much links to.
Okay.
Mostly, I think they're,
What's the cost?
oh, it varies from $100 up.
On up,
on
and
up.
on up.
Up. If I wanted to do my Y DNA to all the markers of male's Y DNA, probably cost me about $650.
Well, that's not too bad. That's not so much. I mean, that's. To have that found.
That's less, by the way, that I spent on a genealogist trying to find my grandfather in Kentucky. But he wouldn't have found my grandfather in Kentucky, I mean, this won't find my grandfather in Kentucky,
So
either,
you-
unless somebody.
Along the way, you paid somebody.
I did one time when I was looking for this book, because there's an argument in my family
Okay.
who made a jump of faith of something they found on the internet, and it's not right.
Okay.
And so I was trying to prove them wrong, and I didn't. But I didn't prove them right, so. But you can find it there, as I said. 23andMe got in a little trouble because they were claiming they were going to be able to give you information about your health and some characteristics that the FDA says no, or the Bureau says
It's
no.
basically correct data that there isn't enough. I say this as a daughter of a genetic professor and a bunch of friends. The FDA has to regulate everything, and people lobby people, let's just put it that way. So the medical industry is not interested in you being able to pay $99 and get your own data, medical advice. They'd rather you go through the medical industry and pay much more money to people. And they have to get all that red tape cleared up in court, and it's all new science and new laws. They have
And
to
it's
make.
all, and it's changing every day.
Yes, so it's a
That's
hot
the
red
problem.
tape mess right now.
Right, so it'd be kind of crazy. Yes, ma'am.
When you had your wife scan, did you find any big surprises, or was it just so much Scandinavian that it was all
It
the
was
same?
40-some-odd% Scandinavian, and we know she's, well, was as 52, I'm sorry, and she's at least 50-50 since both her paternal and maternal grandparents came to this country.
That's interesting.
I'm sorry. Your,
My mother's
Your-
parents.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Both came from
his
Sweden.
mother's parents, her mother's parents both came from Sweden.
What was the name of that book you said?
Albion Seed, ALBIONS, SEED. Wonderful book. David Packett Fisher, FISCHER. And I got that from the Geological Society, right?
How do you spell Hackett? How do you spell Hackett?
Hackett, HACKETT.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The Mormon people in Salt Lake have a mine that they store all kinds of records in. How has this DNA fed into that library of all inheritance that they keep?
They really, how do I say this nicely? They don't really believe in the results of DNA too much, the Mormons. So it turns out that people were able to show that Native Americans were not the lost tribes of Israel, and they don't accept that. So, or they didn't the last time I heard. But they have a marvelous source of data. It's huge. You have to be careful with everybody's source of data. I mean, the only one you don't have to be careful with, if you get enough of it, is this data. But they're probably the best source of data, I think, in the U.S. in terms of just getting information and finding family trees and all that kind of stuff.
For genealogy, right?
For genealogy,
Yeah, not
right.
for the genetics.
Not genetics. Yes.
Yeah, I'm with Family Tree DNA, and the Y is P109, and I got an email from somebody running one of the P109 groups, and said, please join our group. You know, we all had the same ancestor about 5,000 years ago, and see what we can delineate amongst the group members. So I went to see if there was some kind of a more definitive test I could take, and the system said there's no such test I can do, so I'm stuck at 5,000 years, is that the deal?
Well, you've had more luck than I have, so I can't tell you.
Which means there's not enough of you in the database yet. I don't know my birth father because I'm adopted and I was never told his name, but I know I have a bunch of men that are I1 star. So that means we're so new that we haven't even been assigned the numbers after. We're a branch off of I1 with a little asterisk next to it, meaning. There's not enough of you guys who've given your samples for us to even. Yeah, exactly.
It's data.
Yeah.
If you were gonna do one test, which one would you recommend?
I think I would do it with Family Tree DNA, and I would probably do the one they call, this the first time, the ancestor. No. Yeah, it is an autosomal test.
Yeah, it's an autosomal
Family
test.
finder?
Family Finder.
Family Finder will be the best
Yeah.
to get.
Family Finder is a good place to
Family
get started.
DNA.
Family Finder?
Finder within FTDNA.
Yeah.
There's a specific test that is called Family Finder.
Yeah.
And that will get you probably access to the most individuals that would match up with you DNA wise, and then it's up to you to contact them. I've taken 2 tests, which were really virtually the exact same test because they used the same lab and it was the exact same test. They interpret them slightly differently. I did Ancestry.com and I also Ancestry DNA and also 23andMe. And I have since downloaded all of my data and actually uploaded it also onto Family Tree, because a lot of them will now let you
Yes.
upload somebody else's test, so that way you can get the benefit all of their all 3 or 4 databases. Plus, there's another one out there that you can upload to that's absolutely free, because somebody, a geneticist, said, people need to know what's going on.
So what do you turn out to be then?
Well, let's see, what do I turn out to be? Actually, while he was speaking, I went ahead and pulled up my chart of what I am, so I'll quickly review this. I'm Asia Central, less than 1%. European comes out to 99%, of which I am 72% from Finland and Northwest Russia, which I just took the DNA test to verify all of the genealogy research that I had, which showed me going 500 years back in Finland. Western European, 10%, British, 8%, Irish, 5%. Then I have a 2% Scandinavian, which would probably be Norwegian, Danish, and Swedish. And then also I have 2% Iberian Peninsula, which could be Spanish
Or Irish too.
Yeah.
Why?
Iberian is Scottish and Irish.
Any more questions?
Is your DNA impacted if you have a blood transfusion or an organ transplant or anything like that?
I don't know the answer to that. I would, now, unless you have it. No, I don't think it would be. But I don't know. Do you know? Anybody know? Yes.
I have another question. The military and law enforcement are taking DNA tests on a regular basis. Is that information being fed into these DNA research groups, or is it separate?
I don't think so. But we never know, do we? Would be another source of DNA?
Yeah, that's a good
Data.
question. I know that academically there's strict protocol you have to follow. So my grandpa was a genetics prof and we used to talk about this all the time. You have to get a willing sample. Sign on the dotted line anyway. But that doesn't mean that they don't use other databases for
Let's take one more question, and you can also keep on talking.
Sure, I'll stay around and
Yeah.
talk.